Hopewell woke up every morning to the hum of factory shifts. This small West Virginia town had lived a quiet life for more than a century, first in coal mining, then in auto parts manufacturing. Everyone knew everyone here, and news traveled faster than the internet. David Corman woke up at 6 in the morning, as he always did. 38 years old, a man of sturdy build stretched habitually and looked at his wife sleeping next to him. Samantha was lying on her side, her blonde hair scattered across the pillow. They had been married for 6 years now, and he still considered himself lucky. "Good morning, beautiful," he said softly, kissing her on the temple. Samantha slowly opened her eyes and smiled. At 34, she was still an attractive woman, tall, slender, with soft facial features and penetrating green eyes. "Morning, sunshine. Is the coffee ready yet?" "Coming right up." David got out of bed and headed for the kitchen of their small house on Main Street. They had gotten the house from David's parents, a typical American cottage with a white picket fence and a small garden. While the coffee maker was running, David looked out the window at the deserted street. Hopewell was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors at night, where kids could play in the yards until dark, where the loudest event of the month was the city council meeting. It was the kind of life he wanted after 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan. "What time is shift change today?" Samantha asked, coming down the stairs already dressed in her nurse's uniform. 7 o'clock. "What about you?" 8. "I'm on duty until 11 today." David poured coffee into 2 mugs. One said "Best husband in the world," a gift from Samantha for his last birthday. On the other, "Hopewell's best nurse." "Listen, do you remember what I said about the new guy at Four Corners?" David said, referring to the local pub. "That bartender? Rick what?" "Yeah, Rick Stone. Came in yesterday for a beer after his shift. Guy's young, about 29, says he moved up from Charleston, looking for a bigger job than bartending." Samantha tensed almost imperceptibly, but quickly pulled herself together. "Why did he move here? There's more work in Charleston." "Said he was tired of the big city, wants a quiet life." Samantha nodded and finished her coffee. "I should get going. I'll see you tonight." She kissed her husband and headed for the door. David escorted her out with a glance, admiring her gait as always. Samantha was graceful in everything, in her movements, in her speech, in the way she cared for the patients at the hospital. At Hopewell Regional Hospital, Samantha was one of the most experienced nurses. She worked in the emergency department and surgery department, and her colleagues respected her professionalism. Dr. James Patel, the hospital's chief surgeon, especially appreciated her work. "Good morning, Samantha," he greeted her as she walked past his office. "Good morning, Dr. Patel." James Patel was the only person in Hopewell who knew the truth about Samantha. The 45-year-old Indian-born doctor had come to the township 5 years ago after a divorce, looking for a quiet job at a small hospital. He recognized Samantha immediately, though she introduced herself by a different name and from another town. 7 years ago in Charleston, he had operated on a young man named Samuel Thompson, performing a sex change operation. It was a complicated surgery, and Dr. Patel remembered his patient well, not only because of the complexity of the procedure, but also because of the courage with which Samuel approached this life-changing decision. When he saw her 3 years later at Hopewell Hospital, already as Samantha Corman, a married nurse, he decided not to interfere. Everyone was entitled to a new life, to happiness, to love. But sometimes Dr. Patel worried what would happen if the truth was revealed. Meanwhile, at the Four Corners, Rick Stone was wiping glasses and preparing for the opening. The pub was the heart of Hopewell's social life. It was where the factory workers spent their evenings. It was where they discussed local news. It was where they met and parted company. Rick was an attractive young man, tall, athletic, with dark hair and brown eyes. He worked in several bars in Charleston, but could not find himself. Moving to Hopewell seemed like a chance to start over. Last night, as David Corman sat behind the bar, Rick noticed a picture in his wallet, a beautiful blonde in a wedding dress next to David in a suit. "Beautiful wife," Rick said. "Samantha, best woman in the world," David replied proudly. Something about that face seemed familiar to Rick, but he couldn't figure out what it was. All night he'd been tormented by the feeling that he'd seen this woman somewhere, but couldn't remember where. This morning, While sorting through boxes of personal belongings in his rented apartment above the pub, Rick came across an old high school yearbook. He'd gone to high school in a small town near Charleston, and sometimes liked to flip through old photos. Opening the album to the graduating class page, Rick saw a familiar face. Samuel Thompson, 2007, a skinny teenager with long hair and soft facial features. Rick remembered Samuel as a quiet, shy boy who kept to himself and was sometimes bullied by his classmates. Rick scrutinized the photo, then pulled out his phone and found a photo online of David and Samantha Corman's wedding that had been published in the local paper 3 years ago. The comparison was striking: the same eyes, the same face shape, the same curve of the lips. "No way," Rick whispered. But the more he compared the pictures, the more convinced he became. Samantha Corman and Samuel Thompson were the same person. That meant David Corman's wife had been born a man. Rick closed the album and set it aside. He needed time to think. What should he do with this information? Should he tell David? Did he have the right to interfere in someone else's life? But one thing he knew for sure: life in Hopewell would never be the same again. At the hospital, Samantha felt anxious all day. David's mention of the new bartender from Charleston made her nervous. Hopewell was her sanctuary, a place where she could be herself: woman, wife, professional. Here, no one knew about her past, the agonizing years in the wrong body, the long road to becoming who she truly was. Moving to Hopewell 7 years ago was no accident. After surgery and hormone therapy, Samantha needed a place where she could start a new life. The small West Virginia town seemed perfect, far enough away from Charleston, but not far enough to create suspicion. Here she had new papers, a new job, a new identity. Meeting David had been a gift of fate. He was a kind, honest man who loved her just the way she was. Back from the army, he was looking for stability and peace of mind, exactly what Samantha could give him. Their relationship developed naturally, without pressure or coercion. The only lie in their relationship was her truth. "Samantha, can we talk?" Dr. Patel approached her during their lunch break. They stepped out into the small garden behind the hospital where the nursing staff usually smoked or relaxed. "You seem worried these last few days," the doctor said. "I'm fine, Dr. Patel. Samantha, I've known you for 3 years. Something's not right." She sighed. "David mentioned a new bartender in town. He's from Charleston." Dr. Patel understood her concern. "Do you think he might recognize you?" "I don't know. He might. I'm so happy here, doctor. I have a husband, a job, a life. I don't want to lose it all." "Samantha, have you thought about telling David the truth?" She shook her head. "He wouldn't understand. David is a good man, but he's a conservative. He was in the military. He has traditional views. It would ruin our marriage." "But what if he finds out from another source? Wouldn't it be better if he heard it from you?" Samantha remained silent. She'd thought about it many times, especially in recent months. David deserved the truth, but she was afraid of losing him, afraid of losing everything she'd built over the years. That evening, when David returned from the factory, he found Samantha in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked pensive, which was uncharacteristic of her. "Rough day at the hospital?" he asked, hugging her from behind. "Just an ordinary day. How about you?" "Normal too. Listen, do you want to go to the Four Corners tonight? It's been a while since we've been out anywhere." Samantha tensed in his embrace. "Why don't we stay home? We'll watch a movie." "Samantha, we've done nothing but stay home for the last 2 months. We need to socialize with people more." She turned to him. "David, don't you think we're happy enough as it is? Why do we need someone else?" He looked at her carefully. "Are you all right? You seem kind of weird today." "I'm fine, just tired." David kissed her forehead. "Okay, we'll stay home, but we'll definitely go out tomorrow." That night, Samantha couldn't sleep for a long time. She lay next to her husband, listening to his steady breathing and thinking about how fragile happiness was. One careless word, one meeting with the wrong person, and everything could fall apart. And in the apartment above Four Corners, Rick Stone was awake too. He was holding his high school yearbook and contemplating what to do next. Part of him said it was none of his business. Another part thought David had a right to know the truth about his wife. By morning, he had made his decision. The next few days in Hopewell passed in deceptive tranquility. Rick Stone worked at the Four Corners, watching the customers and pondering his discovery. He decided not to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe the resemblance was coincidental. But the more he thought about it, the more convinced he was right. Samuel Thompson from his old school had indeed been a quiet, withdrawn teenager who always seemed out of place. Rick remembered how his classmates teased him for his effeminate mannerisms and how Sam avoided locker rooms and gym class. On Thursday night, David came to the pub again after his shift. He looked tired and somewhat irritated. "Regular beer?" Rick asked, pulling out a bottle. "Go on. Whiskey too." Rick poured the whiskey and set it in front of David. "Rough day?" "I don't know." David drank the whiskey in a gulp. "Wife's been kind of weird lately. Nervous, withdrawn. We used to be able to talk about everything, but now it's like she's hiding something." Rick felt his heart rate increase. "How long has this been going on?" "About 2 weeks, maybe 3. We've been married for 6 years, and I thought I knew her like myself. And it turns out everyone can keep secrets." "Have you tried talking to her?" "I've tried. She says she's fine. She's just tired from work. But I'm not stupid. I can tell something's wrong." David finished his beer and ordered another. "Have you ever been married?" "No, I haven't. I've had relationships, but nothing serious." The scariest thing about marriage is when you realize that the person you love might not be who they say they are." Rick nearly choked, wiping his glass. "What do you mean?" "Oh, just philosophizing. It's just that sometimes it seems like Samantha has some secret, something she doesn't tell me about." At that moment, the pub door opened and Samantha herself walked in. She was wearing jeans and a light jacket, her hair gathered in a ponytail. Seeing her husband behind the bar, she headed over to him. "Hey, honey. Thought I'd stop by and pick you up." David turned around and smiled. "Hi, pretty lady. Meet Rick, the new bartender I was telling you about." Samantha turned to Rick, and their eyes met. For a split second, something akin to recognition flashed in her gaze, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Nice to meet you, Rick." "Likewise, Samantha." Rick scrutinized her face. Up close, the resemblance to Samuel Thompson was even more obvious. The same green eyes, the same shape of his chin, the same curve of his eyebrows, but now it was the face of a beautiful woman, soft, well-groomed, with skillfully applied makeup. "Rick moved from Charleston," David said. "Says he wants a quiet life." "I see," Samantha replied, keeping her eyes on Rick. "And what part of Charleston did you live in?" "In different ones. I've been renting an apartment in the South Hills neighborhood for the last few years." "And where did you graduate high school?" Rick sensed she was testing him. "In Bridgeport, a small town about an hour outside of Charleston." Samantha paled slightly. "I see. Where are you from?" Rick asked, even though he knew the answer. "From Ohio. Small town, you've hardly heard of it." It was a lie, and they both knew it. "Okay, time to go home," David said, finishing his beer. "We have to get up early tomorrow." When the spouses left, Rick was left alone with his thoughts. Samantha's reaction confirmed his suspicions. She recognized him, just as he recognized her. There was now a shared secret between them. The next day, Samantha couldn't concentrate on work. Meeting Rick Stone confirmed her worst fears. She remembered him from school, not very closely, but enough to know he was in the same class as Samuel. If he recognized her, her whole new life was in jeopardy. During her lunch break, she met Dr. Patel again in the garden behind the hospital. "Doctor, I need your advice." "I'm listening." "That bartender from Charleston, he went to my high school. I think he recognized me." Dr. Patel frowned. "Are you sure?" "Pretty much. From the way he looked at me, from the questions he asked. He knows." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Maybe he won't say anything? Maybe he doesn't care?" "Samantha, you have to tell David the truth before someone else does." "I can't. He won't understand me. And if he doesn't understand, is a marriage like this worth saving?" Samantha looked at him with pain in her eyes. "Doctor, I love him. I don't want to lose him." "But you could lose him anyway if the truth comes out that isn't from you." Meanwhile, Rick struggled with his own doubts. Part of him said he should tell David the truth. A man had a right to know who he was married to. The other part realized that it would ruin a lot of people's lives. On Saturday morning, when there were few customers in the pub, an older man named Frank Miller, one of the establishment's regulars, approached Rick. "Boy, do you know the Corman family?" Frank asked, ordering a beer. "David? Yeah, he comes by sometimes." "Good people. David's a hero, fought 3 times in Afghanistan, and his wife is gold. Samantha got everyone back on their feet at the hospital when I had my heart attack." "How long have they been married?" "About 6 years. He met her shortly after he got back from the army. She'd just come to town then, got a job at the hospital. A handsome couple, I must say." "Where did she come from?" "Ohio, they say. She was a quiet girl at first, but then she settled in. David fell in love when he saw her. Within a year, they were married." Rick nodded, continuing to wipe his glasses. Every detail confirmed his hunch. Samantha had shown up in town 7 years ago, just when Samuel Thompson was supposed to be graduating from college. The timing coincided with the period when a man could go through sex reassignment surgery and recover. "Don't they have children?" Rick asked cautiously. "No, it hasn't worked out yet. Samantha says there are medical issues of some sort. David is getting upset, he wanted kids." That explained another detail. Of course, Samantha couldn't have children. It was physically impossible. That evening of the same day, Rick saw Samantha entering the local drugstore. He decided to follow her, leaving the pub to the deputy. At the pharmacy, he pretended to buy aspirin and watched Samantha talk to the pharmacist. "I need to pick up some medicine for Samantha Corman," she said. The pharmacist pulled out a bag of prescription drugs. Rick had time to make out the name on the package. Estradiol. It was a female hormone taken by transgender women to maintain feminine features. Now, he had all the proof he needed. On Sunday, Rick took a drastic step. He knew that David usually came to the pub around 7 in the evening, and Samantha worked until 11. This gave him a chance to talk to David alone. David arrived exactly on time, looking even more somber than usual. "Normal?" Rick asked. "Let's go straight for the whiskey, and a lot of it." Rick poured a double shot. "Something wrong?" "Same old thing. Samantha's completely distant from me. We barely talk at all. And when I try to find out what's going on, she shuts down even more. Maybe she's really having problems at work? I don't know. Honestly, I feel like she's cheating on me. Not in the sense that she's cheating, I'm sure she is. But she's hiding something. Something important." Rick sensed that the moment of truth had arrived. "David, what if I told you that I know what she's hiding?" David looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" "I recognize your wife. We went to the same high school. But she said she was from Ohio." She was lying. Samantha grew up in Bridgeport, a half hour from Charleston. But her name wasn't Samantha then. David set the glass aside. "I don't understand." Rick took a deep breath. "Her name was Samuel then. Samuel Thompson." A heavy silence hung. David stared at Rick, unable to make sense of his words. "What are you saying?" "David, your wife was born a man. She had a sex change a few years ago." David stood up so abruptly that the chair fell over. "Are you out of your mind? What nonsense are you talking about?" "I realize this is a shock, but I have proof." "What kind of proof?" Rick pulled out his phone and showed a picture from the school yearbook next to Samantha and David's wedding photo. "Look at the eyes, the shape of the face. It's the same person." David grabbed his phone and scrutinized the photos. The resemblance was striking, but he didn't want to believe it. "It's just a coincidence. People can look alike." "What about her taking female hormones? I saw her buying estradiol at the drugstore." "Lots of women take hormones." "What about the fact that you don't have children? She talks about medical problems but doesn't specify which ones." David began to hesitate. Too many details were coming together. "Even if that's true," he said slowly, "why are you telling me this?" "Because you have a right to know. Because marriage is supposed to be built on honesty." "Or maybe because you like ruining other people's lives." Rick shook his head. "David, I realize it's painful, but the truth is the truth." David slowly sat back down. His world was crumbling before his eyes. The woman he had loved for 6 years, the woman he thought was his soulmate, was not at all who she claimed to be. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. "That's your decision, but I'd talk to her if I were you." David finished his whiskey and walked silently out of the pub. Rick stared after him, realizing that he had set off a chain of events that could no longer be stopped. At the hospital, Samantha was finishing her night shift, unaware that her secret was out. She thought about how tomorrow she would definitely talk to David, tell him the truth herself. What she didn't realize was that it was already too late. David walked down the empty streets of Hopewell, not noticing the cold evening air or the few passers-by. His mind was reeling with Rick's words, the pictures he'd shown him, all the little things that now added up to a terrible picture. His wife, the woman he loved more than life, was not who she said she was. He reached the house and stopped in front of the porch. Samantha was still at work. The night shift at the hospital didn't end until 7 in the morning. He had time to think, to decide what to do next. Inside the house, everything reminded him of their life together. The pictures from their wedding on the mantelpiece, her things scattered around the house, the smell of her perfume in the air. 6 years of marriage, and all that time she'd lied to him. David went up to the bedroom and sat on the bed. He tried to remember any signs, hints he might have missed. Now knowing the truth, some things took on new meaning. Samantha never undressed completely in front of him, always finding reasons to turn off the lights during intimacy. She avoided beaches and pools, never went to the gynecologist at the local hospital, saying she had a doctor in Charleston. But there were other memories. How tenderly she cared for him after his war-related nightmares. How she supported him when he couldn't find a job. How they laughed together, made plans for the future, dreamed of children. Children. Now he understood why it had never worked out for them to have a child. Samantha always talked about some medical problem, but never went into detail. He didn't insist, thinking it was a sensitive subject for a woman. By morning, David still hadn't decided what to do. When he heard the sound of the keys in the lock, his heart raced like crazy. "David? Are you home?" Samantha called out from the hallway. "Here," he replied hoarsely. She walked up to the bedroom, looking tired after her night shift. Seeing him sitting on the bed fully dressed, she frowned. "You've been up all night? What happened?" David stared at her, trying to see the masculine features in her face. Now knowing the truth, he noticed things he hadn't noticed before. Slightly broader shoulders, the lack of pronounced feminine curves, the carefully applied makeup that hid some features. "David, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "We need to talk." Samantha sat down next to him on the bed. "About what?" "About you. About your past. About who you were before you became my wife." Samantha's face went pale. "I don't understand. I met someone who knew you, from your old school." Samantha froze. "Who?" "Rick Stone, the bartender from Four Corners." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was pain and doom in them. "What did he tell you?" "The truth. What you should have told me yourself 6 years ago." Samantha stood up and stepped back to the window. "David, your real name is Samuel. Samuel Thompson. You were born a man." The words hung in the air like a sentence. Samantha stood with her back to him, shoulders shaking. "Tell me that's not true," David whispered. "Tell me he's lying." Samantha turned around. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I can't." David felt the world finally crumble beneath his feet. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid of losing you, because you're the best thing that's ever happened in my life. You lied to me for 6 years. I didn't lie about loving you. I didn't lie about who I am." "Who you are?" David stood up, his voice growing louder. "You're a man. You've always been a man." "No!" Samantha shouted. "I've never been a man. I was born in the wrong body, but I've always been a woman. Inside, in my soul, in my heart, I've always been a woman. That's crazy. You can't just decide what to be." "David, please listen to me. Let me explain." But David wasn't listening. 6 years of deception, 6 years of living with a man he turned out not to know at all. Rage, pain, and a sense of betrayal mixed inside him into a toxic cocktail. "Explain what? How you deceived me? How did you make me live your lies?" "It's not a lie! I am the same woman you fell in love with. You are not a woman, you never were. Samantha recoiled as if slapped. David, don't say that, you don't understand. I understand enough. I realize I married a man. I realize I've been fooled by everyone. He headed for the door, but Samantha blocked his way. Where are you going? Away from here, I need to think. David, don't go, let's talk like adults. Talk? He laughed bitterly. What should we talk about? About how you decided to change your sex and didn't see fit to warn your husband about it? I wanted to tell. Many times I wanted to, but I was afraid I'd find out the truth about who I married. David pushed her away and left the room. Samantha followed him. David, please! I'm still the same woman. I'm still your wife. He turned around at the front door. You were never my wife, because you're not a woman. The door slammed shut, leaving Samantha alone in a house that no longer felt like home. David got into his pickup truck and drove away from town. He needed a place to think, to come to his senses. He headed for the lake 20 miles outside of Hopewell, where he sometimes fished on weekends. The lake was deserted on Monday morning. David sat on the shore, staring at the water and trying to figure out what to do next. His world had turned upside down overnight. The woman he loved, the woman he trusted, had turned out to be not at all who she claimed to be. Worst of all was the sense of betrayal. It wasn't that Samantha was transgender, although that too was a shock to the conservative small-town man. Worst of all was that she'd lied to him all these years. Every day of their life together was built on deception. The phone rang several times. Samantha tried to reach him, but he wouldn't answer. He needed time. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Patel noticed that Samantha hadn't shown up for the afternoon shift. It wasn't like her. She never missed work without a good reason. He tried to call her, but her cell phone wasn't answering. After lunch, he decided to stop by her house. The Corman house stood with the curtains closed. David's pickup truck was not in the driveway. Dr. Patel knocked on the door. Samantha opened it a few minutes later. She looked awful, eyes red from crying, disheveled hair, crumpled clothes. Samantha, what's wrong? He knows, she moaned. David knows. Dr. Patel strode into the house and closed the door. Tell me. Samantha told him about the confrontation with her husband, about how Rick Stone had revealed her secret. Where is David now? I don't know. Left this morning. He's not answering his cell phone. Samantha, you have to give him time. It's a shock to him. You saw the way he looked at me, like I was some kind of monster. He doesn't understand. Most people don't understand what it means to be transgender. What if he never understands? If that's the end of it? Dr. Patel didn't know what to answer. He had seen transgender patients lose families, friends, jobs when their truth was revealed. Not all stories had happy endings. By late afternoon, news of what had happened in the Corman family began to spread through Hopewell. Rick told a few of the pub regulars, and the information spread through the town with the speed of wildfire. There was no talk of anything else at the Four Corners. I can't believe it, Frank Miller was saying. Samantha always seemed so feminine. Hit it well then, replied another visitor. Poor David. Can you imagine what it's like to find out your wife is actually a man? Is it even legal? Can a man marry another man? Technically, she changed the paperwork, so technically it was a marriage between a man and a woman. But that's cheating. She should have told him. Rick listened to this talk with growing concern. He hadn't expected the news to spread so quickly. He now realized that he had set in motion a process that could destroy not only the Cormans' marriage, but Samantha's life in town. David arrived home late that night. Samantha was sitting in the living room waiting for him. She had changed her clothes and cleaned herself up, preparing for the conversation. Can we talk? She asked quietly. David walked past her to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. Talk. David, I understand that you're angry. I understand that you feel cheated. But I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. But you did. Yes. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. David turned to her. Why didn't you tell me? Why let me marry you without knowing the truth? Because I was afraid of losing you. Because I knew if I told you, you'd leave. And you were right. Those words hurt Samantha, but she continued. David, I'm the same woman you fell in love with. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. You lied to me. I didn't tell you about my past. That's not the same as lying. It's exactly the same as lying. You let me think that you... He stammered, unable to say the words. That I'm what? That you're a real woman. I am a real woman. No, a real woman is born a woman. Samantha stood up. David, you don't understand. I was born in the wrong body, but my soul, my mind, my heart, all of it has always been female. That's nonsense. You're a man who decided to pretend to be a woman. I'm not pretending. I'm living the life that fits who I really am. David shook his head. You know what? I don't care. I don't care how you feel about yourself. The fact remains that you were born a man, and I'm not gay. Our relationship was never homosexual. You fell in love with a woman. I fell in love with a lie. Samantha felt something inside finally break. So it's over then? 6 years means nothing? 6 years of deception means nothing. And love? And what we feel for each other? David finished his whiskey and set the glass down. I don't know what I feel. I need time to think about it. How much time? I don't know. Maybe I should live somewhere else for a while. David, don't go. We can get through this. I don't know if we can. He headed for the stairs but turned around. And another thing, the whole town already knows. By tomorrow morning, everyone will be discussing it. Samantha went cold. What do you mean? Rick told me in the pub. The news has spread. When David left upstairs, Samantha was alone in the living room. Her world was crumbling, not only at home, but in the city she considered home. Tomorrow she was going to face not only a broken marriage, but the judgment of the entire community. She pulled out her phone and dialed Dr. Patel's number. Doctor, I may need your help. Things seem to have gotten worse. The next few days became a nightmare for Samantha. David packed up and moved to the Pinewood Motel on the outskirts of town, saying he needed time to think. Samantha tried to call him, but he didn't answer his cell phone. The atmosphere at the hospital had changed dramatically. Colleagues who used to be friendly with her now avoided her gaze. In the corridors, conversations stopped when she passed by. Some patients demanded another nurse. Samantha, we need to talk, Dr. Harrison, the hospital's chief physician, said Tuesday morning. In his office, Samantha saw a hospital administration representative and a lawyer. Samantha, I've received several complaints from patients and their families, Dr. Harrison began awkwardly. Some are demanding that you not participate in their treatment. On what grounds? They say they feel uncomfortable given the circumstances. What circumstances? I'm still the same nurse I was yesterday. The lawyer interjected, Mrs. Corman, do you understand that stating incorrect information on employment documents can be grounds for dismissal? I did not provide any incorrect information. All of my documents are valid. But you didn't disclose your sex change, because it has nothing to do with my professional life. Dr. Harrison sighed. Samantha, I realize this is a difficult situation, but the hospital can't ignore the concerns of the patients and the community. Are you firing me? For now, we're reassigning you to administrative duties, just for the time being, until the situation settles down. Samantha realized this was tantamount to firing. In a small town, such scandals were not forgotten. Leaving the hospital, she made her way to Dr. Patel's office. He was the only person who could understand her. They practically fired me, she said as she entered his office. Dr. Patel closed the door. Samantha, I'm so sorry. I tried to talk to the administration, but there was nothing you could do, I understand. What are you going to do? I don't know. David won't talk to me. The job's gone. The whole town looks at me like I'm a monster. Maybe you should leave? Start over somewhere else? Samantha shook her head. This is my home. I don't want to run away. But if staying here is impossible, I have to try to talk to David again. He has to listen to me. At Four Corners, Rick regretted his decision to tell David the truth more and more each day. He saw how the news had shattered not only the family, but Samantha's life in town. Many pub-goers were discussing the situation, and their comments were becoming increasingly cruel. I always said there was something wrong with her, one regular said. Too tall for a woman. And her voice was always kind of low, another added. Poor David. Can you imagine what it's like to live with such a perversion? Rick couldn't take it anymore. Hey, take it easy. She's not a pervert. Just different. Protecting her, Rick? Frank Miller grinned. And you're the one who told us the truth. Maybe I shouldn't have. Bullshit. David had a right to know who he married. On Wednesday night, Samantha took a desperate step. She drove to the Pinewood Motel to talk to David. The old two-star motel stood off the highway leading out of town. It was where truckers and the occasional tourist stayed. Samantha knew David's room number. She called the motel's front desk. As she knocked on the door of room 12, she heard a familiar voice say, "Who's there?" "David, it's me. Please open up. We need to talk." A long pause. Then the door opened. David looked awful, unshaven, red-eyed, in crumpled clothes. The room smelled of alcohol. "What are you doing here?" "Trying to save our marriage." "What marriage?" "There was no marriage. It was a sham." Samantha walked into the room. It was small and shabby. A bed, a table, 2 chairs, a TV on the dresser. There was a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. "David, are you drinking?" "What else am I supposed to do?" "Talk to me. Hear me out." "I've listened to you. You said you've always been a woman at heart. That's very touching." "David, I realize this will shock you, but think about what we had between us, about our feelings. Doesn't that mean anything?" David poured himself a whiskey. "You know what the worst part is? Not that is who you are. The worst part is the lies. Every day, every night, 6 years of lies. I didn't lie about my feelings for you. You lied about who you are. I am exactly who you know me to be. My biology does not define my personality. It does for me." David drank the whiskey in a gulp. "I'm a soldier. I'm a conservative. I can't be married to a man. I'm not a man. You were born a man. So what? People are born with all kinds of problems. Some are born blind, some are born in the wrong body. It's not the same. Why? Because you don't understand?" David stood up and walked over to the window. "Samantha, I'm tired of arguing. I'm tired of thinking about it. I just want you to leave." "David, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. Are you really willing to throw away 6 years of happiness because of what happened before we met? 6 years of deception. 6 years of love!" He turned to her. There was pain, anger, and something else in his eyes. Something dangerous. "Love? You call that love? Making me live in your fantasy? It's not a fantasy. This is my life, my reality. Your reality is a lie." "Enough!" Samantha shouted. "Stop calling me a liar. I've been honest about everything but one thing. Except the most important thing. The most important thing is that I love you. The most important thing is that you're a man." Samantha froze. There was so much hatred in his voice, so much disgust, that she physically felt the pain. "You hate me," she whispered. "Yes, I hate you for what you did to me. David, get out. Get out of here and never come back." Samantha stood in the middle of the shabby motel room, feeling her last hope crumble. The man she loved more than life was looking at her with hatred and disgust. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll leave. But know this. Whatever you think of me, I was a good wife, and I really did love you." She headed for the door, but David suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wife?" Something frightening sounded in his voice. "You think you were my wife? David, let me go. We weren't even married for real. I married someone who doesn't exist. Let go!" But instead of letting go, he squeezed her hand even tighter. There was an expression in his eyes that Samantha had never seen before. The savage rage of a man who feels betrayed and humiliated. "6 years," he whispered. 6 years you've forced me to be something I'm not. David, you're hurting me. David, Hurt you? Doesn't it hurt me? What about me? What am I going to say to people? What will I tell myself? His grip grew tighter and tighter. Samantha tried to break free, but he was stronger. "David, please." "Please what? Please pretend nothing happened? Please accept your lies? Let me go." Suddenly, something in him broke. Years of repressed anger, the pain of betrayal, alcohol, his conservative upbringing all came together in one moment of rage. His hand moved from her wrist to her throat. "You ruined my life," he whispered. Samantha tried to scream but could only wheeze. His fingers clenched tighter and tighter. "David, don't!" But he couldn't hear her anymore. In his mind, she was no longer the woman he loved. She was the source of his pain, his humiliation, his ruined life. Samantha tried desperately to free herself, but her strength was leaving her. There was no love or regret in her husband's eyes, only blind rage. The last thing she saw was the face of the man she loved most in the world, distorted with hatred. When it was over, David stood in the middle of the motel room, staring at the motionless body on the floor. The rage was gone, leaving only emptiness and horror at the realization of what he had done. He had killed the only person he truly loved. Samantha Corman's body was discovered the next morning. The maid at the Pinewood Motel, 50-year-old Dolores Vasquez, came to clean room 12 and found the door ajar. Inside, on the floor between the bed and the window, lay a young woman. Dolores screamed so loudly that she was heard in neighboring rooms. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived on the scene at 9:30 in the morning. In her 42 years, she was the only senior investigator at Hopewell Police Station, a short, stocky woman with short brown hair and tired brown eyes. She'd seen a lot in her 15 years on the force, but murders were rare in their quiet town. "What do we have?" she asked Officer Jones, the first to arrive on the scene. "Female, approximately 34 years old. ID says Samantha Corman. Cause of death is strangulation. No signs of struggle or robbery." Detective Mitchell examined the body. Samantha was lying on her back, eyes closed, with distinct fingerprints on her neck. The expression on her face was calm, almost peaceful. "Who's registered in this room?" "David Corman, her husband, checked in 3 days ago." "Where is he now?" "Gone. His pickup's gone too." Detective Mitchell knew the Corman family. Everyone knew everyone in the small town. David was a veteran, worked in a factory, was considered a decent man. Samantha worked at the hospital as a nurse. For the past few days, the whole town had been talking about the scandal in their family. "Put out an APB," she ordered, "and find me some witnesses. Someone must have seen or heard something last night." The motel manager, a nervous man named Bert Collins, said that Samantha's car pulled up to room 12 around 9 o'clock that evening. He saw her enter the room. "And then what happened?" "I don't know. I wasn't watching. But around 11, I heard yelling coming from that room. Thought the spouses were fighting. They've been fighting a lot lately." "Why didn't you intervene?" Bert shrugged. "None of my business. Family squabbles." Detective Mitchell sighed. Typical small-town reaction to stay out of other people's business, even when someone's life was in danger. David's pickup truck was found 2 hours later by a lake 20 miles outside of town. He himself was sitting on the shore, staring into the water. When the police approached him, he didn't resist. "David Corman, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder," Detective Mitchell said as she handcuffed him. "I know," he replied quietly. At the police station, David confessed at once. He recounted what had happened in the motel room, not trying to justify his actions or shift blame. "Why did you do it?" Detective Mitchell asked during the interrogation. David remained silent for a long time. "I don't know. I was drunk, angry. She wasn't who she said she was." "You mean the fact that she's transgender?" "She lied to me for 6 years. I thought I married a woman." "Samantha was a woman." "No, she was born a man." Detective Mitchell studied his face. David looked devastated, broken. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a man who had committed a terrible act in a moment of blind rage. "David, do you realize you killed the man you loved?" His eyes filled with tears. "Yes, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life." The news of the murder shook Hopewell. In a town where serious crime happened once every few years, the murder of a wife by her husband was the main topic of all conversation. Reactions varied. Some residents sympathized with David, believing he was the victim of a hoax. Others condemned him for his cruelty. But most just didn't know what to think. At the Four Corners, Rick Stone stood behind the bar, feeling guilty about what had happened. If he hadn't told David the truth, Samantha would still be alive. "Hey, Rick," Frank Miller called out to him. "You were the first to know the truth about her, weren't you?" "Yeah," Rick replied reluctantly. "So if it hadn't been for you, David would still be living in ignorance." "Maybe." And now a man is murdered and another is going to jail. How do you feel? Rick set aside the glass he was wiping. Disgusted. Why? You did the right thing. The man had a right to know. Had a right to know, but he didn't have a right to kill. I agree, but if you think about it, it's not exactly killing an ordinary person, is it? She was deceiving him. Rick looked at Frank in disgust. She was a human being, a living human being, and now she's dead. Yeah, but there's no but. She's dead, and it's partly my fault. At the hospital, Dr. James Patel sat in his office, unable to concentrate on his work. He knew Samantha better than anyone in this town, understood her struggle, her courage. Now she was gone, and he felt he had failed to protect her. A nurse knocked on the door. Dr. Patel, Detective Mitchell is here to see you. The detective entered the office and sat down across from the doctor. Dr. Patel, I need to talk to you about Samantha Corman. I've already heard. It's a terrible tragedy. Were you close to her? We worked together for 3 years. She was an excellent nurse. Did you know about her past? Dr. Patel hesitated. Even after a patient's death, doctor-patient confidentiality remained sacred. Doctor, she's dead. Your silence will protect no one. He sighed. Yes, I knew. I was her surgeon in Charleston 7 years ago. Why didn't you say anything? What was I supposed to say? And to whom? Everyone has a right to privacy, even if that right costs a life. Detective, Samantha was a brave woman who fought for the right to be herself. She didn't deserve to die for being born in the wrong body. Detective Mitchell nodded. You're right. No one deserves to die like that. David Corman's trial began 3 months later. The case drew not only local attention, but also national media attention. It was one of the first cases in the country to examine the murder of a transgender woman in the context of domestic violence. The prosecutor sought a charge of first-degree murder, arguing that David acted willfully. The defense pushed for second-degree murder, citing emotional distress and alcohol intoxication. Many witnesses testified at the trial. Dr. Patel spoke about the kind of person Samantha was. Rick Stone admitted his role in solving her mystery. Colleagues at the hospital spoke of her professionalism and kindness. David testified in his own defense. He talked about the shock of learning the truth, the sense of betrayal, and how alcohol clouded his mind. I don't condone what I did, he said, addressing the jury. Samantha didn't deserve to die, but I felt cheated, humiliated. My life turned upside down in one night. That doesn't give you the right to kill, the prosecutor pointed out. I know, and I'll be responsible for it for the rest of my life. The jury deliberated for 2 days. In the end, they found David guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison. David Corman, the judge said at sentencing, you killed a man because of prejudice and misunderstanding. Samantha Corman was a woman who fought for the right to be herself. Your inability to accept that led to a tragedy that destroyed 2 lives. After the trial, life in Hopewell slowly returned to normal, but the tragedy left deep scars in the minds of residents. Dr. Patel continued to work at the hospital, but often thought about Samantha. He became more openly supportive of LGBT rights, realizing that silence could cost lives. Rick Stone left Hopewell 6 months later. Guilt over his role in the tragedy kept him in the dark. He moved to another state where no one knew his story. Detective Mitchell continued to serve on the police force. The Samantha Corman case was one of the most challenging of her career, not in terms of investigation, but in terms of understanding human nature. Samantha's grave in the city cemetery became a place sometimes visited by people who support transgender rights. A simple headstone read, Samantha Corman, loving wife and caring nurse, 1,990 to 2,025 inches. A year after the tragedy, Dr. Patel received a letter from a transgender rights organization. They wanted to name a new relief fund after Samantha Corman. She deserves to be remembered not as a victim, but as someone who fought for her right to be herself, they wrote. Dr. Patel agreed. He realized that the best memorial for Samantha would not be to mourn her death, but to fight to make sure tragedies like this never happen again. Samantha and David Corman's story was a warning to all. It showed how dangerous prejudice can be, how destructive it is to hate what we don't understand. In prison, David Corman spent his days thinking about the wife he killed. He saw a therapist, trying to understand his actions. Slowly, very slowly, he began to realize that Samantha was indeed a woman. Not biologically, but in every other way. Too late, he realized that love had to be stronger than fear, understanding more important than prejudice. But that knowledge came at too high a price. Samantha Corman dreamed of simply living an ordinary life, to love and be loved, to work, to benefit society. She was killed not for what she did, but for who she was. And that was the greatest tragedy of all. In the small town of Hopewell, where everyone knew everyone, where news traveled faster than the wind, where people considered themselves good Christians and upstanding citizens, there was the murder of a man for daring to be himself. It was a story about love that could not stand the test of truth, about prejudice that proved stronger than humanity, about how fear of the unknown can turn an ordinary man into a killer. And worst of all, it was a story that could be repeated in any other city, in any other family, where misunderstanding and intolerance triumph over love and compassion.